What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Hope everybody's good. It is gonna try to do these on Wednesdays from now on. So hopefully, if you are watching me, hello to you. Hey on Instagram, I see you 601. Love you, 601. Good man. It's all good. So hope everybody's doing great. Got a lot going on today. Got a lot to talk about. Really excited. Gonna dig in some pretty tough topics today. So hopefully you guys can stay in and do me a favor. Like by all means, if you haven't already, do me a favor and leave a like, leave a comment, leave just something wherever you are. If you're on Instagram, leave me a little hi. Hit the little like heart button in that lower right hand corner. I love those little hearts as they bubble up. If you're listening on YouTube, do me a favor, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe. And if you've got an athlete with big dreams, big aspirations, regardless of what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to go D1, D2, D3, make the Olympics, play pro, whatever, I work with those types of athletes and their families. So a lot of the advice that I give rubs a lot of people the wrong way because I am the more I do this, the longer I've done this, the more I realize that my message is for those athletes that are really wanting to make that happen, take 100% responsibility and really make it work in a big way. So, hey, Christina Strakes, I see you there. How do your dad? Listen, so we're gonna I'm gonna get right into it today. There's a lot of great stuff to talk about and a lot of some tough topics for sure. But we'll get started here. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about is about Sha'Carri Richardson, and you might have seen this week. Now, I don't care if you're not a track athlete. If it doesn't matter if you're a lacrosse player, a hockey player, a luge athlete, a bobsled athlete, a figure skater, a gymnast, whatever. The story about Sha'Carri Richardson is pretty interesting. And so, one of the bits of advice I give to all my athletes is that you should really not be, when you watch a sporting event, you should really watch it without the sound. Don't be listening to the announcers. You should just be listening maybe to the music or nothing at all, because a lot of what is filtered through the media gives a false representation of what's really happening to the athletes on the field of play. And for my athletes, I want you to understand that that basically your experience can be very different than what is happening right there. And what happens, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the Emma, the British tennis athlete. But this idea that when you listen to a sports announcer, you're seeing the event through their filter, and that doesn't have to be your filter, right? So that's really important to understand is that how you're filtering things is really important. Okay. So when you see an athlete who you may, there's a saying like, don't meet your heroes, because sometimes when you hear from about the sporting event through their eyes, then it affects how you feel. And that's not necessarily true. It doesn't necessarily have to affect you like that. Okay. So Sha'Carri Richardson, if you don't know what the story is, like, so U.S. Olympic trials, track and field trials happened like last week up in Oregon. It's always a massive deal before the Tokyo Olympics are just a few weeks away. And USA Track and Field runs their Olympic trials like right before the Olympics. So it's a big buildup and it's really cool stuff. And Sha'Carri Richardson is one of the top female athletes in the world. She's a gold medal hopeful, and I'll just put up an image there. But it was crazy. So this year she's won like pretty much everything. She finished second to a British athlete, Emma Smith. But now the name is totally affecting me now. But anyway, so Sha'Carri is like basically the best in the world. And what's a big deal about it is that she's also a favorite in the 100-meter, which hasn't happened in the U.S. As a U.S. woman in about 10 years. I think that's the deal. So a lot of buildup in the United States about this, about Sha'Carri Richardson. And then so crazy thing happens. Like basically she gets she has an interview with a reporter, and the reporter tells her that her biological mother has died. What? Crazy, right? Like that's just weird. And so what ends up happening is that Sha'Carri goes out because of the trauma, and she talked about how shocking it was. I think she said it was nerve shocking or shock nerving, one of the two. But the idea was that she went off and she smoked pot to deal with the pain, right? To deal with the pain and the emotional pain of having to deal with that. Now, listen, I'm going to talk a little bit again. I just want to let everybody know, like, my advice is for like athletes who are super serious about the results and they want to basically take 100% responsibility for everything that they do and the results that they get, because that's really the most powerful position you can be in. And successful people will tell you that no matter how bad things are in their life, that they have the ability to take action, and from that action, then they are going to they're going to get a result, and then that result is purely theirs. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Sha'Carri basically said that she knew what she was doing when she smoked pot and the risk that takes. And from an Olympic athlete standpoint, smoking weed is probably like the worst drug you could possibly take because it stays in your system for a really long time. And so, and testing, like back when I was an Olympian a long time ago, basically pot stayed in your system for like 30 days. So if you smoke pot today and in 29 days from now you get drug tested, the remnants of basically of cannabis is stuck in your system and they'll find it in your urine. Okay. Now testing now is much more advanced. I'm sure it's even longer than that. Okay. So it's really important to kind of keep that in mind. So the fastest US woman in a decade, like fails a drug test. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the world, like the general population, was like up in arms, like, oh, smoking weed is like not that big of a deal. Like you shouldn't, and oh my gosh, she lost her mother. Like that's horrific. And so what happens is everybody filters this through their own experience, right? Now I'll tell you like the harshest approach that I can possibly give you right now, and we'll build from there. Every day, people lose their biological mother. Like every day, some people, somebody's going to lose their biological, they're going to die, right? And you're going to have to deal with that. Now, in this case, I get it. There's a reason why this story is all over like the tabloids, is because it's kind of weird, right? And so she talks about like, her the relationship that she has with her mother. She was basically raised by her grandparents, and her grandmother and her aunt raised her. Her biological mother was like not really in the picture. But that's neither here nor there. Like, I don't really, I'm not really interested in that part of the story. It sucks. I appreciate it. But the message that I want to bring across today is that as an athlete, okay, there are going to be 9 women on the starting line at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, not all of them lost their biological mother this week. I get it. But the bottom line is that there's going to be 9 athletes that are going to be on that starting line. And one of those athletes is going to be the athlete that she lost to earlier this year at the Grand Prix in Gateshead in the Diamond League. But the point is that, and I said this a couple weeks ago when I was talking about Naomi Osaka and her situation there. Sport doesn't care about what you're dealing with. Like, there's no asterisk, there's no there's just a score. There's just in the 100-meter dash, there is just a there's just a number. It's like, this Olympic champion ran 10.8 and there it is. There's no asterisk that gives points or attacks for what that athlete had to deal with. And the conversation now, like today, is very much about athlete feelings and their emotional, their mental health and their well-being. And I get it, but that's always been there. And the thing is that while Sha'Carri Richardson had to deal with this, with the loss of her biological mother, regardless of the situation around that, whether she was close to her mom or not, like that's irrelevant. What happened here, though, is that something happened, some sort of life event happened that derailed this athlete in such a way that she then looked to things outside of herself to help cope with that. Right? That's the mechanics here, right? The event plus the response equals her outcome. So E plus R equals O. So the event gets kind of sideswiped by some random reporter saying, "Hey, your biological mom died," and you totally know that reporter was just like sitting on that story to spring it on her and hoping that nobody else would. But my question is like, well, where was her team? And the team around an athlete isn't just like the team. It's like it's going to be her grandmother, it's going to be her aunt, it's going to be her agent, it's going to be her mental performance coach if she doesn't have one. And with the U.S. Olympic Training Center, there's tons of resources for athletes that they can have. And so the agent, her chiropractor, her acupuncturist, like her coach, her head coach, like you know these are all people that athletes set up around them to be their support team. And I call this your athlete mastermind, right? You really need to have like that third party that can help you like go, okay, wait a second. Right. So this, and Olympians in like the 100-meter dash, the 100-meter dash for both the men and the women is like the premier sporting event globally, not just at the Olympics, but in the Diamond League every event they have. So if you look at this, like this is like the Diamond League, worldathletics.org. You can see every athlete's ranking, see where what they're doing, what their personal bests are, how their times have changed over the years, and over the seasons. Like you see her times improve in different events and her progressions. This is really kind of cool, right? You can see like basically 6 years ago she ran a 12.9. And then in Texas, and then this year she's run a 10.7. Okay, so this is a big deal, right? And so for an athlete to be sideswiped by any of this information always surprises me a little bit. I'm kind of like, what? All right, but the truth is that the event, biological mother passing away, her response to that event, regardless of how she gets the information, her response to that event equals her outcome. And what's happened here is that her outcome supposedly like caused her to go smoke some weed to deal with it, and then that resulted in a drug test. Okay, as tragic as that is, and as the general sports fan will be like, that's horrible, I go like, yeah, but there's 9 other athletes who are going to be in that starting line. So for the athletes listening to me right now, while everyone is quick to blame everything else, like, oh, the U.S. Olympic Committee sucks, or for not putting her on the team anyway. And that was discussion because it was like she had like this 30-day ban and then she could still run the relay. But the U.S. Olympic Committee left her off the team anyway because she tested positive. And that's, I think kudos to them. It sounds harsh, but it's the rules, right? And it's the rules that as Olympians, that's what we are putting ourselves in, is that we are putting ourselves in this world of to be drug tested. And a lot of people don't get that. The general population doesn't get that. They're like, oh, you should give her a pass. It was her mom. Like, oh my God. No, that's the deal. Like, when world records are certified, there's a wind aided, and actually you can see right here. So along with this result, when a sprinter races, they say like, oh, they ran a 10.7, but they had a wind aid of 1.6. And there's limitations as to what wind, how big the wind can be, or how strong the wind can be to certify a world record. So somebody may run a world record, but if it's wind aided, it doesn't count as a world record because it was wind aided. But the same thing goes with all these other things and reaching for, whether you're reaching for, your favorite blanket, your stuffy, weed, alcohol. There's certain things that fall within the realms of what's allowed and what's not. And unfortunately that bit her in the butt. Now, a couple things I just wanted to kind of talk about. One is that I'm a little fishy. I feel a little fishy about this whole situation, because it doesn't totally pan out. In some ways, she smoked weed and she got pot, but really, you're like one of the top athletes in the world. What's going on. And even though she said that she knew what she was doing, one thing that this does, something to understand from an athlete's perspective, is that these track and field athletes make a lot of money from the Diamond League all season long. So the Olympics, while being Olympic champion, is a big deal. And she's only 21, right? One thing that this causes an athlete to do is miss any other drug testing. And so, there's just some speculation there, and I'm not going to get too deep in that because a lot of you that listen to me don't fully, you're not fully into that side of sport, which is great. But there's some weird things here. But what I want to understand is this, okay? Is it one of my athletes understand is that the message here is that Sha'Carri reached for something outside of herself to deal with this. Now, it's not like as an athlete you visualize your mom passing away suddenly or being told by a some random reporter. I get that the surprise, even the relationship here is weird, but again, it's her response to this event. Now, if you understand this, that even in the most tragic situations, not everybody reaches for weed. Not everybody reaches for alcohol. Not everybody, just thinks their life is over. And if anything, the message I want to share with everybody is like, if your mom passed away, like she doesn't want you to suffer, right? She wants you to go off and do amazing things. And this is where a really supportive message that should have gotten to Sha'Carri at this point was like, yo, you don't have to do this. Your mom doesn't want to see you like medicating with weed that's going to cause you to miss the Olympics. That's kind of dumb. All right. So, we want our athletes to understand that your ability to grieve, okay, and you've heard me talk about this before, like grieving. I believe that the key to athletic success is really about like to expedite the grief process, to go through all the phases, right? And depending on which model you look at, there's like 5 stages of grief, right? So if the first one is like anger and denial, oh my God, I can't believe my mother died. That's horrible. The second one is bargaining, like I would do anything to get my mom back right now. All right. The third phase though is depression. And this is where a lot of people get stuck because depression is what gets you in kind of this negative feeling. And now more than ever, our athletes are being taught like that, oh my God, you shouldn't deal with that. Like you shouldn't have to deal with that feeling. No, you're right. You shouldn't have to deal with it. But that's as athletes, that what we do. We go out, we go compete, we have a result. The result isn't that great. And guess what? That makes us feel bad. But from that feeling, that negative feeling is what we're going to rebound from. And the next stage from depression in the grieving stages is basically turning it around. It's this feeling of like, all right, I know things are shitty right now, but they're going to get better. And it's that moment of like optimism where a person, not just an athlete, a person starts moving up. And the final stage of grief is acceptance, right? And so the faster, whatever event that happens to you, whether you lose your biological mother or anything else, right? Your response to that is what's really important. And so as you go through those grieving stages, right, when you get to that depression stage, you're not meant to stay there, right? It's like it's the Winston Churchill quote, which is like, when you're going through hell, keep going, right? Don't just sit there, right? And so what's unfortunate about this, what really bums me out, is that Sha'Carri made the choice to search for weed, which, like I said, it's the worst thing an Olympian could pick when you're getting drug tested. It's just dumb. So there's a little bit of self-sabotage here, which is kind of interesting. But that's a whole nother conversation. But there's athletes that when you're getting close to that success, that it's a psychological trait for some people that they get really close. It's not fear of failure. There's actually fear of success. And that may be in play here slightly as well. Okay. And so as an athlete, as you get towards your goal, right? And Sha'Carri is going to go to Tokyo and possibly win Olympic gold. That's a big deal. That's like, but there's people who will self-sabotage themselves. And that's really, it's a complicated thing. But I wanted to I want to make sure we touch on that a little bit. The other thing I want to touch on here is how the general population is going like, oh, weed's no big deal. This shouldn't be testing for weed anymore. Okay. Here's the deal. So I'm an American, but I live in Canada, and in Canada, they've made weed is legal, and there's like cannabis stores, there's like Spirit Leaf, and there's Tweed, which I think is kind of a cool name. It's Tweed. We sell weed. That's their motto. So I live in a country where weed is legal, and it's crazy because like we go skiing, and we hit the parking lot after skiing, and there's people like lighting up in the parking lot before they drive home. That's a little weird, okay? But the thing I want to talk about right now is this idea of like, should weed be tested for? And the answer is yes. And some people think like, is weed performance enhancing? Well, when I was an Olympian, there was this conversation like that weed helped some sports, but not others. Like if you were an Olympic lifter, weed wasn't going to help you. But if you were like a biathlete and you wanted to regulate your heart rate, or you're a pistol shooter or an archer, it would be performance enhancing for those sports. However, one thing that I've learned, I've come to understand is that as an athlete, we have between now and whenever we have, let's say we have an event coming up in a few months. What ends up happening is that we are going to train and recover and train and recover and train and recover. That's really what being an elite athlete is all about, is we are training. So train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. That's the motto, right? So the more frequently you can train and recover, and the more frequently you can kind of create that oscillation, the better you are going to, the more opportunities you have to train, the more chances we get to basically wire our nervous system on what we want to have happen. And the more frequently we can do that, the better. So a couple of the things I just want to share with people about the weed offense. So weed, like there's THC and CBD and cannabinoids. I won't get all technical in here. This is a fantastic article here by marijuanadoctors.com. I'll put the link in the comments. But the idea here is that I just want to read you some of the benefits, because people are going like, "Oh, Sha'Carri, we shouldn't test for it." It's not true. All right. So here's the deal with THC. Some of the effects of THC include a sense of euphoria, relaxation, pain relief, amplified senses, increased creativity, and an overall feeling of well-being. Okay, that's THC. In the CBD, or so THC in weed gives you kind of like the more euphoric psychosomatic, it's not psychosomatic, psychedelic aspects, if you get it. Not everybody gets it. All right. But the potential benefits of CBD, which is like, people have CBD oil, and that doesn't give you like the high that pot will give you, but it will give you a lot of the other benefits. So the benefits of CBD include improved mood, pain relief, decreased appetite, anti-inflammatory responses, and migraine relief. So when you look at the benefits of CBD, you can see how a lot of those effects, or those benefits, can actually help a sprinter. It's not about the performance enhancing benefits at the moment in the event. It's all the time between, when an athlete is training and recovering and training and recovering. So this is why marijuana is still tested for, and why I think it should still be tested. Now, if you're not an Olympic athlete and you want to go smoke a joint because you want to chill out for a little bit, that's cool. But again, all of the ability we have to deal with the events in our life are in here. They're right here. And so as an athlete, here's the deal. If you tap into that, if you understand what's going on, right, mentally, emotionally, physically within your body, if you understand that, you will not fall prey to reaching for things outside of you to self-soothe. And we are, like, human beings love to do that. And the general population who doesn't know half of what you know as an athlete, and they're the ones that reach for these things. This is why people go to Vegas. This is why there's cannabis retailers all over, or liquor stores. It's why we have illegal drug trades and things like that. People are always looking for things outside of themselves to deal with the feelings they have inside, right? And like I said at the beginning of this video, rather harshly, I know, but there are 9 other athletes that are going to be running at the 100 meters in Tokyo, and Sha'Carri Richardson isn't one of them. And I understand that she went through a pretty traumatic event. However, what's interesting about this is there are a lot of people, thinking about their mom right now, right? Their mom. It sounds to me, and again, this is I don't want to judge the situation, but for someone who grew up without her biological mother, um, wouldn't that be a little bit of a different situation than if you grew up with a really loving mom every day, and so wouldn't that be a little bit different? But again, I'm not judging that. I'm just stating a fact there. But the point is that I want my athletes listening to me, and if you're a parent listening to me and you self-soothe with alcohol or drugs or other sorts of addictions, food, porn, any of those things, the idea here is that you also have the ability to deal with that stuff in here. And I'm pointing to my head for those of you guys listening in on our podcast or on Instagram right now. The idea is that the event, your response, that's what you need to develop, is your response, and that'll equal your outcome. There's 9 athletes on the start line at the Olympics, and Sha'Carri's not going to be one of them. That's disappointing. We're going to miss out on this big event, and everybody, after the 100 meters are over, everybody's going to say, oh, well, but Sha'Carri should have won it. No, that's wrong, right? And Sha'Carri's been totally open about the choices she made, which I think is awesome. Like, she's totally owned it, and that's a great message to have. I'm just wondering, dude, why? You're 3 weeks away from being Olympic champion, and you reach for something that she said she knew the risk she was taking. It's like, dude, that's unfortunate. So I want all of our athletes to understand that the responses to the events in your life are totally yours, and you have to take 100% responsibility for your response over all those events. And when you do, that's the key. When you do, then these opportunities open up, right? When an elite athlete steps out, right, and goes I'm done, I can't deal, and everybody's like, oh, it's so hard, so much pressure. There are other athletes coming in right behind them, right? That's the reality, right? So the job isn't to wish it was easier. The job is to wish that you were better. And that's what I want to leave everybody with here right now. Okay. So listen, if this resonated with you and you want to leave me a really good comment, please do. All right. If you're watching this on YouTube later or whatever, if you've watched all the way to the end, make sure in your comment you write down, I watched all the way to the end. Because if you don't, there's people that leave me 5-second comments after I do 30 minutes of video. But the idea here is that if you want to leave a good comment, please do. But after all that, let's move on to the next topic. All right. All right, 3107 was the number. All right. Jeff Shire, thank you, sir. Appreciate that one. It's a tough one, man. This next one's even better, right? This next one's good too. All right. I didn't even share my I didn't even share my drug testing story. Not my personal one, but one that affected one of my teammates back then. Maybe we'll do that in another event. All right. So moving on to number 2. All right. Emma Raducanu, if I'm saying that right. Emma Raducanu. I love that. If I'm saying it right, I could say it all day. Okay. So Emma Raducanu is a British tennis player. And for those of you who don't know who she is, okay, she's in Wimbledon right now. I'm clicking through things right here. And she's 18 years old. Okay. She's a studette. She's just killing it. And she made it all the way to the round of 16 at Wimbledon. So imagine you are 18 years old. You are you're kind of on people's radar tennis wise. You get to Wimbledon. So you're British and Wimbledon is in England, right? And all of a sudden, and they're rabid about British tennis players there. So Andy Murray, when he finally, won it a few, if you haven't seen the Andy Murray documentary, I think it's on Prime. No, it's not Prime. I think it's on Apple TV, but a fantastic documentary about him making Wimbledon and all this stuff. So I got the video playing of her right now. This was her the round of 32, not 16. So this was before, but anyway, she's awesome and she's killing it. And what's ended up happening though is that she got to the round of 16 the other day, and she lost the first set like 6-4, and then she was losing the second set 3-love, and she retired from the match. Basically, what she said was she was having trouble breathing and she felt dizzy, and the medical staff said she should stop. Now, that bothers me. Okay, that bothers me is when the medical staff gets involved in the moment, because basically, from what I've pieced together all that through all this, is that when you're an athlete, or even if you're just a general human being, if you take short breaths right now, what's going to happen is that, and you do that for a significant length of time, what's going to happen is that the CO2 levels in your blood is going to go up, the oxygen to your system is going to go down, and you're going to get dizzy, right? You're just going to get dizzy. You're going to get lightheaded, and you're going to feel like passing out. And the other thing that happens there is you probably haven't eaten real well. And then when you haven't eaten real well, then now your blood sugar's low. And then when your blood sugar goes low, you feel even more dizzy. And it's just kind of weird. Okay. It's just a bit of a downward spiral here that then makes you feel like you have anxiety. And oh my God, and you can't and then now your mind goes like, oh my God, the butterflies in your stomach are not flying in formation. You're freaking out inside, and now you're even more dizzy, and now your heart rate goes up, and now you're breathing shorter and shorter, and the CO2 level goes up, and you get dizzy. And then you take a little medical time out like Emma did in Wimbledon, and then she goes to the locker room, and now the medical staff is like, oh my God, what's going on? And they test her. She's got elevated heart rate and she feels dizzy. What do you think the medical team is going to tell you? We think you should stop, or else you may fall over and hit your head in the middle of the court. And then you might get a concussion. And because we're all medically, we're all legal, liable here to your safety, if we don't tell you to stop right now, and that all happens, and you fall down and hit the back of your head, and then you die because of a brain aneurysm or bleeding on the brain, then we're all liable for and we're all going to get sued. So we think you should stop, Emma. This story was like nuts to me. Okay. And so then what ended up happening is that John McEnroe, who is some of you might know who John McEnroe is. So he's doing the commentary, and he makes a comment because she retires from the tournament. She goes, it just all seems a bit too much for her right now. Well, holy smokes, like the world like jumped on John McEnroe for his comments and how insensitive they were. And you got to remember, this is why I tell my athletes, you should watch events and, without the sound, right? You should just watch the events without the sound and nobody else's commentary, because the general public got all over this and then said, oh, John McEnroe is like, insensitive to, women's, or calling women just emotional. It's none of that. It's none of that. Let's think about this for a second. And let's think of the E plus R equals O. So the event, you're 18 years old. Your Instagram account just went from a few thousand people to 250,000 people in like days. Plus, you're in England, where the tabloids are nuts, right? And they want to know, they're going to dig. I mean, there's probably paparazzi outside of her house like right now trying to get photos from this. This is the world she's just elevated herself to. Now, what's phenomenal to me is that every athlete dreams of this type of, like every tennis player dreams of being on center court Wimbledon. If you're a British athlete and you're a tennis player, this is like you're being reminded of this daily. And then all of a sudden it's here. If nobody has helped you mentally prepare for that moment, granted, that's a huge ask, right? Like to mentally prepare someone for this moment. But this is every tennis player's dream. And now she's living it. And she's 18, right? It's like there's just not a lot of experience there. And then John McEnroe comes out and says, hey, listen, it just all seems too much. It just seems to be a bit too much for her right now. That's a fact. Because if it wasn't, she'd still be playing, right? So everybody jumping on this is where the general population goes like, Oh, it's all too much. It's crazy. And John McEnroe even said, like, even with Naomi Osaka, like opting out, like he's just covering his own tracks in this moment. All right. And so for my athletes, when we're working on these things, these types of like situations, not this, but per se, but like just getting to these moments, you need to be ready for anything. Like that's my motto now. It's like are you ready for anything? And in this case, for Emma, it was all a bit too much. And that's okay. That's all good. This is a huge ask to ask, you know, when any athlete gets to that stage, this is part of the game. It's dealing with those emotions. It's being able to manage her recovery between points to bring her heart rate down, to get oxygen in her system so that she can keep going. Because if you don't manage that stuff, then this happens, and that's okay. But now the cool thing about John McEnroe is like John McEnroe actually made it to Wimbledon when he was 18. Now Pierce Morgan, who's a bit of a gong show. I don't even think I have this back up here, but uh, uh, this is where. Well, let me scroll back here, see if Pierce Morgan. Because Pierce Morgan is a jerk because he handled this how like you're not supposed to handle it. So he goes, McEnroe told the truth. Mrs. Raducanu's a talented player, but couldn't handle the pressure and quit when she was losing badly. That's not true. She wasn't losing that badly. I mean, that's a lame comment from him. Okay. Not quote brave, just a shame. If I were her, I'd tell my fans to stop abusing McEnroe and seek his advice on how to toughen up and become a champion like he was. And so as harsh as that was, it's from a fan perspective, the fans don't fully get this. They don't understand all the parts and pieces. That's why they are on their couch watching television and she's out there competing, right? And that's why my advice is for those athletes, right? And so the truth is that in this situation, um, Emma needed more support to help her manage this. And this is a very unique situation. Like you're 18 years old, it's Wimbledon, it's your home country. It's a big deal, right? It's a massive deal. And I don't know what her Instagram followers are now, but when this all of a sudden becomes so real, as a young athlete, all this stuff is a dream, but then it becomes really real. Um, and that can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And that's the lesson that we want people to take. So Pierce Morgan, yeah, he's a jerk. But what John McEnroe said is true. It was all too much. Now, this is her response, okay? And this is, I think, important for athletes to understand. She goes, "Hi, guys. I wanted to let everyone know that I'm feeling much better this morning. First up, I want to congratulate Isla, who she was competing against, on an incredible performance. And I'm sorry our match ended the way it did. I was playing the best tennis of my life," right? That's a cool story. In front of an amazing crowd this week. And I think the whole experience caught up with me, which is what John McEnroe said yesterday, just for the record. Okay. At the end of the first set, after some super intense rallies, elevated heart rate, a lot of it, a lot of work, I started to breathe heavily and felt dizzy. Okay. The medical team advised me not to continue, and I touched on that a second ago. And although it felt a little like the hardest thing in the world not to be able to finish my Wimbledon on the court, I was not well enough to carry on. I want to thank the people who have cheered me on every single match I wanted to win so badly for you. Right. So that last little comment talks about just some of the pressure that she felt that she was putting on herself, that she was heaping on herself from other people. And that's a very common thing for athletes is to think that, I have all these people who want me to do well. And that's true. And when you're 18, you're going to heap more of that pressure on yourself than maybe a more seasoned vet who understands like it's all part and parcel, right? There are a lot of people at play here, but it's not your responsibility to win for them. It's your responsibility to win for you. And winning is a byproduct of managing all these little things in between. And it's what the irony here is that of all the people that she didn't want to let down, those people didn't help her to prepare for this moment. See how that goes, right? So as much as an athlete, we want to take 100% responsibility. In this case, she needs to go and be like, okay, how could I have managed that better? Because then next year, when she was in Wimbledon, she's going to need those tools. Now, we would have loved for her to have those tools right now, but she didn't. For whatever reason, she didn't. And so the truth is, okay, now we're just going to learn from it and keep going. right? That's what our athletes need to understand. So if you, as an athlete, if you feel nervous going out to game day, well, that's on you. You got to learn how to manage those things, right? And manage that sensation. And the idea is like, the goal is not to operate. And this is what I was poorly taught when I was an Olympian. The goal is not um, to try to get to a feeling where you have no nerves. It's learning how to perform with those nerves. Like Sha'Carri Richardson. Her what needed to happen for Sha'Carri was that if she was feeling totally bummed out and depressed, she needed to learn quickly how to run bummed out and depressed, right? And take that energy and turn it for good as opposed to turn it for something bad. So for Emma here, and this, I feel bummed. I'm bummed for her because it would have been great to see her keep going. But the idea is that the medical staff that told her to stop, you know what? She needed to actually compete. She needed someone to go, no, you know what? Listen, you're feeling lightheaded and dizzy. That's all that's going on here. I get it. Now, if that's the case, like I wasn't on the sideline. I'm not a medical professional there at that moment. But if the medical team is telling her to stop because they're worried about her falling over, I would have loved to have another voice in the room going, I understand what you're saying. This is what's going on with you right now internally. This is what's happening. A little bit of oxygen in the locker room probably helped. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's legal at Wimbledon or not, but a few minutes with some oxygen over her mouth, if that was the case, probably would have helped her a ton. And I believe is okay. So I'm not sure. Medical timeout it's called. But anywho, a lot of athletes never learn what's going on with their physiology in the moment. And when you understand what's going on with the physiology, then you have your brain goes, oh, I get it. I understand what we're going through here. Let's tough this one out, right? I'm down 3-love in the second set. I'm probably going to lose this event anyway, but let's see if I can learn from this and go through this, because holy smokes, wouldn't that be amazing? Because what John McEnroe said, which is totally true, he lost when he was 18 and he went to Wimbledon. He lost, and I can't remember what round he lost in. I think it was in the semis. But he was like, it's the best thing that happened for me. So while everybody was freaking out on John McEnroe here and how insensitive he was, he's actually right on. And for the athletes listening to me now, the idea is like, okay, it's all good. Whether she was, having trouble breathing or whatever, it's all good. She's going to live. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't come back next year and just kills it, right? Absolutely kills it. But as an athlete and as a parent, if you're reading through all this stuff and you're like, oh my God, yeah, it was crazy, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, Piers Morgan, John Morgan, blah, or John McEnroe, blah, blah, blah. Don't buy into any of that crap. Listen to the message. John McEnroe won Wimbledon. Okay. And he is like, he runs a tennis center in New York. He's also an art collector. He's a super successful dude. He's worth listening to. All right. As I hope you think I am, because I want your athlete to succeed. And that's the deal here. So Emma's a stud and a studette. I'm super psyched for her. As a fan of sports, I just know she is going to be ridiculously good coming up here. And in the future, and we're gonna be able to see her for a long time. So, and everybody's coming, oh, sweetheart, it's all good. You're such a sweetheart. You tried real hard, whatever. Listen, again, there's athletes who are continuing to compete in Wimbledon who manage to deal with the pressure, right? That's now her pressure is unique too. That's cool, right? But the bottom line is that sport goes on without you, and it's either your choice to learn how to manage that, or you just opt out. You say, this is too much for me. Just like Naomi Osaka did a couple weeks ago. Hey, dealing with the press is too much for me. I'm going to take time off. Go for it. Go for it. That's totally cool. But again, don't wish that it was easier. Wish that you were better, right? Because that's the reality of sport. It's the reality of life. All right. So there you go. All right, so we're going to keep going here. Last one. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour because I go too long. And if you've be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Do me a huge favor. Subscribe to this channel on YouTube. We're like 78 subscribers, but a lot of people are listening on podcasts and stuff, which is totally cool, or on Facebook. I love it. But if you could do that, that'd be fantastic. And we will, keep pumping these out every week. So appreciate it. Appreciate that you're here. Finally, we're going to go through bridging practice to game day. So this kind of ties in a little bit today. A question that I've been getting a little bit this week is because a lot of my athletes are now in their summer events, and they're going to showcases where there's like college recruiters and things like that. And so that everybody feels like the pressure is big, and some athletes aren't really dealing with it very well. They're not doing very well, but they do well in practice. So the thing to understand about this is that the biggest disconnect between practice to game day is one, thinking it's a big deal, right? And for athletes who are process focused versus outcome focused, if you're process focused, game day is not that big of a deal, right? It doesn't matter who's in the stands. You're still going out on at practice, and you're competing as well as you can. And I wish I had really understood this when I was younger, because I still succumb to that. I still succumbed to that when I was young. This idea that oh my God, a game day, I got to turn it on. And I've shared the story, like when I went to the Olympics and we all went to Oslo, and we landed on the ferry, and we landed in Oslo, and we went to the SAS hotel, and we got all our Olympic team gear, like our coats and our jackets and stuff. It's kind of a cool deal. We're all walking around in underwear. Well, we did it back then. They probably don't do that anymore. But the whole team, boys and girls, we're all walking around in our underwear, trying on clothes. Pretty cool deal. But the truth is that I was nervous then. Like the butterflies were going like right there. But one thing that I didn't fully understand was managing that, how my nervous system was going to be dealing for 2 weeks before my event. And then the morning I woke up for the Olympics, I had nothing. I was dead. I was like completely dead inside. And that was weird. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have someone handy that I trusted. That just the other day, like one of my clients, one of my athletes called me up and goes, "Hey, I'm going to this event tonight, and I'm nervous. What's the deal?" And literally just talking for 15 minutes completely talked that athlete kind of down, and where they understood what was going on, and they went out and they just killed it. They just totally killed it. I was so proud of them. All right, but you got to have somebody like that in your corner. And if you don't, if I can help you, that'd be great. But you got to have somebody who understands what's going on, right, internally. Because you then, as the athlete, the responsibility is that you've got to go to practice, and you've got to bridge the gap between what you're doing in practice versus what you're going to do on game day. You've got to visualize, like, so for Emma, from Raducanu from the UK, who pulled out of Wimbledon, I doubt she was visualizing, hey, my Instagram account just blew up to 250,000 people, and I'm at Wimbledon, and it's center court, and she didn't do enough of that, right, in practice. And tennis, I think every event is like this. Practice the game day. Like, you go from training, and then all of a sudden at the Olympics, there's like all these colored banners that are there, and there's there's cameramen in your face. Depending on your sport, that may be weird, but like if you're a 100-meter track swimmer, you're used to that. But for a lot of athletes, that all of a sudden, they go from shooting, being an archer in like total seclusion to all of a sudden in front of a ton of fans, right? And that's different. I remember competing on race days where all of a sudden, we went to Oberhof, Eastern Germany, and there's like 32,000 people, or supposedly, for when we were there for World Championships. But during the week, there's like, your coach on the sideline smoking a cigarette. That's the deal. So bridging the gap between practice and game day is really, really important. And I would say a lot of my female athletes that I work with, a lot of the girls are way more conscientious and hardworking, and I don't know if it's like a maternal instinct as well, like caring for their teammates or their coaches or their parents, or wanting to do well for everybody. I maybe it is like part of that maternal instinct, but my female athletes tend to have more of that burden than the men do, or the boys do. Okay. And so I want to encourage you to understand that, listen, those people support you, but they're not supported by you. All right. That's okay. Like, if you lose, that's no big deal. All right. And so you've got to realize that when your parents are driving to all these events, that's okay. That's their choice. That's their choice as adults. It's not, if you lose, they're going to love you whether you win or lose. Right? It's really important to understand. But the big disconnect is between athletes just not putting enough pressure on themselves in practice, so that game day feels easy, right? And realizing that on game day is their time to just kind of let loose, right? As opposed to try to turn it up a notch. If you haven't turned it up a notch, if you haven't put it to 11 in practice, you're not going to all of a sudden put it to 11 on game day. Okay. So what many athletes do is they treat practice like a 7, and then they hope on game day they turn it up to 11. Just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. And physiologically, you feel different. The other thing that keeps athletes from succeeding on game day is not paying attention to environment, right? People, places, and things. This is really, really important. I can't stress this enough. Is it going to be hot on game day versus what you've been doing in practice? Like, I read this story. This was a couple of years ago, of a triathlete who posted, on some Reddit forum, disappointed on their event in Kona. They went to Kona, Hawaii, for the 7.3, not World Championships. The 7.3 happens I can't remember what month it happens in. I think it's February, right? But they've been training indoors because they live in like a northern climate. And I think they were actually in Alberta, where it's damn cold. And so they're training in an air-conditioned climate, no heaters, no nothing. And they go to Hawaii where it's hot, and they had a bad event. Why? Because their body wasn't adapted. Duh. Right? People is another one. Some athletes perform, like if you think of like Premier League soccer players who come from, African nations, and all of a sudden they get to England and they're playing for a team in England, and they're getting like abused, they're getting racist comments from the stands. They may have been told about it, but when they're finally actually out in that situation, I can only imagine for some of them what a change in just what a possibly like unique situation, just crazy. But what that athlete needs to do is they need to get a video or audio from the pitch out, right? Seeing the stands and hearing those racial slurs being commented and being able to operate within that situation, right? That's the deal. And that sounds weird and it sounds strange, but it's really what needs to happen, right? And so when you take that responsibility, that level of responsibility, then game day it's no problem for game day. All right. So I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to understand that that's what you're doing, that you've got to basically make practice feel like game day so that you can go out to game day and nothing is new. You've been there before, right? So for Emma Raducanu, who pulled out of Wimbledon, unfortunately, there was not enough time spent dealing like, okay, this is what happens when your breathing goes up, and this is what happens when you feel lightheaded, and this is what you do to get it down, right? Her team let her down. Now, and as an athlete, now she takes 100% responsibility, right? We would have liked to have gotten ahead of that, and unfortunately, people didn't help her enough with that. But now from there, she takes that and goes, all right, 100% responsibility. This is what I got to do between now and next year so that I can survive. And I'm sure next year it won't even be a problem because she has been through it before, right? And there's some things you can't, I don't want to say can't, because you can predict worst case scenarios. Like Sha'Carri Richardson, what happens if you get a message that your mother died, right? How would you deal with that? Right? Oh, that's not going to happen. Well, what if it did? Let's just play that game. Well, I guess I would do this and do this and do this. All right. That's what needs to happen here. All right. So I want your athlete to understand that you can always do a little bit more, and you can always take your game day experiences and bring them to practice. And you want to be creative. Like, you want to be messing around. A lot of people think like practice is a grind. Practice isn't a grind. Practice is a creative endeavor. You are taking your skills that you're working. Like, if you feel like you're just grinding out doing reps, you're completely missing the point. You want to basically mentally wrap your head around, okay, I'm doing this in that environment, not here right now in practice, not in the backyard shooting on a net, not, working on an empty hockey rink shooting pucks. No, it's like I'm in the Stanley Cup final, or maybe not the Stanley Cup final, because sometimes that can be a big jump for an athlete. It's the next thing for them. It's the tryout that they have coming up. It's the recruiting event they have in front of a bunch of college coaches, right? Or it's the Olympics, or it's the Olympic trials, whatever it is, right? Sometimes if you're just thinking about the Olympics, but you haven't mastered Olympic trials yet, well, you're not going to get to the Olympics. So it's your next big game day. That's what you want to focus on, and that's what's most important. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. So listen, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you being here. It's as always, I hope you're having a great summer, and that your athlete's doing great. If I can help you, if you want to book a call with me, athletespecific.com/call. Stay tuned for Mental Performance School, which we're hoping to launch soon. It's a way bigger project than I imagined, but we're excited about that as well. So stay tuned. And as always, if you want to reach out to me, shoot me an email, coachedwards@athletespecific.com. See you next week.